All right, this summer, technology got away from us. I have a lot of teens in my home, and as you know, my girls are a bit younger. So we were thrown into this, and the looser schedule of the summer made it so apparently obvious. There was lots of scrolling while eating, scrolling in the car, scrolling at full volume. Gosh, between my children and my parents, that one is a big one for me, driving me nuts. Kids being huddled around one kid with a phone, sitting right next to your friend, both on phones, all of this stuff, going to grab a device at any given moment. And to be honest, it was consuming. And as I've mentioned here numerous times, I don't necessarily walk around looking for behavior to change, but when I find myself incredibly frustrated, then I know it's time to address some of this. So guess what? Here we are. And I actually think it's a really good time because some bad habits have been established and we are getting into the school year. So you get to go to school on me. I'm going to put up the template of the agreement that we came up to, and I'm going to get into all the things we have talked about around technology. So if you are struggling with it and ready to start the school year with a fresh start, have a good listen. As always, I am Mandy Grass, the family behaviorist. I am a behavior analyst and a parent coach. And today we're talking all things teens, tweens, and technology. Hi, I'm Mandy Grass, the family behaviorist, and these are three of my favorite little humans.
Hi, I'm on this podcast. Let's do this.
Let's do this. This is the behavior blueprint where we can figure out why kids do what they do.
Is that why parents yell sometimes?
Sometimes, because parenthood is messy, behavior is complex, but with the right blueprint, we can figure it out together.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I've mentioned, I really wait for my own frustration before I realize something needs to change. Although I will say the other day, Jerry said that to me, he goes, I think we're really good about recognizing when something doesn't feel good and trying to put some parameters around it. As you know, we are a blended household, so there are different expectations in the three different households our children go to. Mine go to two and his go to two. And so that can be tough to navigate. And those are the things that we started to realize were becoming a little bit problematic. And so when that happens, that's when we have to start talking about what we want to put in place. I'm going to tell you the moment that I realized it was really consuming. So our kids, the two biggest things, I guess three, they do like TV, video games, and their phones. And so one day we had gotten back, we spent the whole day at the beach. So the kids spent the whole day outside. Everyone was having some downtime. Amazing. I love that for everybody. I wanted some downtime as well. We have three family spaces in our home. And so the littles, the 10 and under, four of them were watching a show. And then we have two other common spaces. And of course, the boys like different video games. So one was on an Xbox and one was on a PlayStation. So I'm already tired myself. It's raining outside. There's nowhere else for me to really go. And I'm feeling a little frustrated. And one of our teens is playing a video game, like a shooting video game at full volume, essentially in the middle of the home. And so not my proudest moment, I was incredibly overstimulated. And I was like, where are your headphones? Because we have bought headphones for this exact issue. And they were at a different house. And he was like, I have to listen to be able to play the game. And I see all those people on Instagram who are like, if your kids are into technology, into video games, learn the video games so you get it. Not into shooting in general, definitely not into shooting games, definitely not into the sound of a machine gun in the background of my home. So it was just one of those really overwhelming moments where I was like, everybody's taken over and there's not even a place for us to go. That and a couple of locked in on our phones to the absence of the world around us, scrolling ad nauseum, those sort of things had boiled over for us. And it was like, it's time to put some parameters in place. Here's the thing. It is our job to teach our kids how to manage their time with technology and what it looks like and how much they're getting sucked in. You know, the iPhone has some really wonderful features like screen time and those sort of things, but it's up to us to really help them teach that. Now, when we blended together, we've been blended in this home for a year, sporadically I would check in with my girls and say, what is something you really love and what's something you don't love? And I actually think this is kind of cool in the sense that one of the things the girls said they didn't love was how much the teens were on their phones. And I love that because I liked that they were aware of that. And what I said to Lola about this, I remember this vividly, we were in the car and I said, yeah, it makes me very hesitant to give you a phone. And she said, I know you're going to have rules around it. And that's very true. And not to say that Jerry didn't have rules, but I think this is something that is growing as we learn more. And even with the parameters we're talking about right now, that's going to change. And to be completely honest, it looks a little bit different for our 16-year-old. It all kind of comes down to how our kids are using technology and what we feel comfortable with. There's an element of like, I'm going to take a lot of pictures. Okay. Or like, I just want music in the background. So it's really hard to have completely black and white rules about it. But technology is highly reinforcing, right? There is something to be said about that dopamine. Well, think about how you feel. Hello, I'm part of the problem. I'm one of those people on Instagram, but about when you scroll to like the funny video, the text, the notification, something interesting, another video, another video. Video games do the same thing, like points, wins, levels, sounds, friend, immediate feedback, immediate feedback, immediate feedback. And then we come along and say, like, turn it off. And of course, there's pushback because it is so highly reinforcing. Technology, like especially Instagram scrolling, video games, are built that way on purpose, right? That is the entire function. I am so guilty of it. I know when I get into like the doom scrolling, we are all guilty of that. And so, that's a big conversation with my teens, is not like do as I say, not as I do, but being aware of my own technology use. When I started the Family Behaviorist, and I was posting on YouTube and TikTok. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but in the beginning, I was really obsessed with like replying to everyone and making sure I saw everything. And I found myself like so glued to my phone that I literally got into puzzling because I could not have my phone in my hand and be puzzling. This is called an incompatible behavior. So for me, if it was like I was so focused, I was doing something else with my hands, I was doing something else with my mind. I was guilty, especially during my divorce or when I was like single and married, of two screens. I would have the TV on and be scrolling. And so again, I understand how it happens. But there's also an element of like one day your phone might have your email on it and it might have your clients on it and you might be glued to it at that point. And I don't want that day to be today. If I could give one piece of advice before introducing a phone, so remember, the age in our family is 16, 14, 13. They all have phones. And then Lola, 10, 9, 8, and 5, almost 8 and 5. They don't have any, they have like iPads and stuff that they use occasionally. Before I put the earliest piece of technology in my daughter's phone, and it was a Kitty Buzz phone, it was like, it could do nothing. Before I put that in her phone, we came up with a contract. And I know if you're listening to this, you're going to be like, this woman's insane. If you've stumbled upon this, you're going to be like, you're nuts, let your kid. But I stand by that. And at this point, again, I might eat my words soon, I feel like my kids have a pretty good relationship with technology. And so before I ever put a phone in their hand, there are going to be rules around what that looks like. The idea here is like a gradual release of access. The function of our children's behavior when it comes to the phone or video games is access, access, access. It is something I have realized so explicitly about teens this summer. And of course, it makes sense. They want the things. Also, I want you guys to remember that an access-based function literally means something tangible. So it's not like access to your attention. It is like access to an item. So, it could be access to a certain game. It could be access to Instagram. It could be access to texting your friends, whatever that might look like. And teens are highly access driven. So we want to be mindful when we're giving access, how we do that in a way where we can pull back if we need to. Very similar to the Dr. Pepper, I think I brought this up like 3 episodes in a row, is taking all the technology away doesn't solve the problem either. So even me on my high horse right now being like, I'm going to wait as long as I can to give Lola technology, there is also something to be said about like, technology is going to be in her life. And so really my goal is to teach her how to manage that, to teach her what it looks like. And one of the big things for me is also how you're perceived. I was talking with a friend who had taken a bunch of girls away for the weekend. And she was saying that every second there was downtime, I think they were like 12, 13, they were on their phones. I've also mentioned we live in a cute little small town. Lola is 10. It's about a mile bike ride to like the ice cream shop. And so Lola was like, can I go by myself? We use walkie-talkies. I think I'm going to get her one of those watches so that I can track her, I guess. But we use walkie-talkies. So she took a walkie-talkie and she went down and she came back and she felt really good about it being independent. And I loved all of that. And I said, how was it? And she was like, Mom, there were these 2 boys. They were both eating pizza and they were sitting next to each other on their phones and they weren't talking to each other at all. And she's like, and then I passed a bunch of girls having ice cream and all they were doing was showing each other their phones and laughing. And she was like, I don't want that. And I was like, I don't want that either. But we have to teach how to manage it. And along with that comes some peer pressure. So we teach, we provide structure, we give some independence, we demonstrate the skill, and we increase the independence. That's what we do with any skill we want to teach a kid, so why should it be any different with technology? More responsibility equals more independence. And the ultimate goal is that I don't need to manage this for you, but there is a part of awareness. So what happened the other day, if I already told the story, I'm sorry. But anyway, we'd gone to the beach and the kids hadn't been on their screens all day, and we'd come home. Like, this is what I said. One of my sons was playing video games. But the next day, Jerry decided to sit the boys down and talk about technology. And so he had both of them get their phones out to look at their screen time use. So we'd been with family all day. So there was maybe about 5 hours that they had the opportunity for screens. When one son's screen time was 3.5 hours. And guess what he was doing the other hour and a half? Playing video games. So it's a moment of like, whew, whoa. And listen, don't get me wrong. My phone alerts me every Sunday. Here's your screen time recap. And I'm like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to know how much I'm getting sucked in, right? But that is all a part of it, is just showing you what does that look like. And so we were super frustrated and we needed to make rules because we were becoming angry with it. So he sat down with the boys and we talked about what is actually realistic. My rules, as I'm going to explain them to you, don't have to be your rules. Our kids don't love the rules, and we've had lots of healthy debates about the rules, and I want their opinion. If I'm just going to sit down and be like, here is what I think, this is what it's going to be like, that's going to be even harder. Even right now, we have like the slightest bit of buy-in because they helped come up with the rules. It still gets pushed back. So that is, and this is also something that should be revisited. What does the screen time look like? What are you actually doing on screen time? One thing for Jerry is like, he is like very okay with it if it's social. And I get that a little bit, but also go outside. Okay, so anyway, we're going to get into it. All right, so our phone rules. Number one, and this is going to be a big one, no scrolling in the morning. That doesn't mean you can't use your phone. So we can text friends, we can make a call, we can, like, texting is kind of okay, but the doom scrolling. So what was happening, and this was happening towards the end of the school year as well, and it became like more prevalent in the summer, was like sitting at the kitchen counter scrolling. And so remember, we're trying to get 7 kids out the door. And so there's also a fair bit of learned helplessness. Like, can you get me a water? And I'm not sitting here saying I mind getting water. I'm like running around making breakfasts and lunch, and like I'm happy to do that. But there is a moment of like the dogs are barking, Marley needs me to tie her shoe. I'm in the middle of cooking an egg that like, getting water isn't really functional at this point. And so in addition to like, just asking for things, you're sitting there scrolling. Like, that is a little bit frustrating. The other thing, the kids tend to scroll at full volume. And also you tend to be scrolling when you're not even ready for school. Like, where's your backpack? Where's your water bottle? Where's all your stuff? You don't even have shoes on. And we're like sucked into the phone. So one of the rules we talked about was like no scrolling until afternoon. So in the summer, like we said, they can text or whatever to make plans with friends, but no scrolling. In the school year, I think it's going to look like probably checking your phone in the morning, because I do the same thing, and then putting it away until later. So the other part of this is about scrolling. So we get it. Like, we need downtime. We understand that. After noon, our kids can ask, and they can ask for 20 minutes of scrolling. Here's the important part. They must set a timer. If they do not set a timer, they're going to lose access to the phone. Again, we're trying to surround ourselves with awareness. 20 minutes of scrolling seems like a good amount of time. So I don't want to be their timer forever. I want them to be aware of like, whoa, it felt like 5 minutes, but an hour passed, those sort of things. So we agreed to 20 minutes. They physically set the timer. They can scroll or play video game or whatever. The timer goes off, they put the phone away. Right now, it's like sort of living on the counter for one of our kids. And I don't know if this is anybody listening, but the 3 of our kids with phones all have very different relationships with phones. And so it looks a little bit different. Our middle in the 3, it uses it minimally, does not really get sucked into it at all. The youngest one, and probably because he's had the shortest relationship with the phone, right, does get really, really sucked in. He also gets really, really sucked into video games. And so that might just be part of his personality, and that's just something we want to be aware of. They put the phone away. They can ask later. Absolutely. Not 20 minutes later. Hour and a half, 2 hours later. You want some more downtime? Sure. What we're trying to do is interrupt. It's called response interruption. Interrupt endless scrolling and create awareness of time. Now, I don't know if you've heard anything like from your kids about like there's nothing to do here. Okay, my house, we have a pool, we have a trampoline, we have bikes, we have like a neighborhood we can ride bikes in, we have like a large yard to play soccer, or lacrosse, or wiffle ball, or anything. We have lots of opportunities here, and I do notice a strong correlation between more screen time and more comments when they have more screen time of like, there's nothing to do. I just don't want to squash that creativity. I just don't want to be counting down the minutes until we're on our phone. And this is something we want our kids to learn, like, what does 20 minutes feel like? And can you stop without the time being limited? This is called self-monitoring. The other rule is no scrolling in the car. So in addition to a time suck, we want to be aware of what being a good sibling, child, friend looks like. Okay. Now, listen, I'm not saying we're on a 4-hour car ride and you can't scroll. Not at all. If we're driving 6 hours somewhere, that looks a little different. But what we want to kind of get back to is asking first. So last year we took a trip down to the Outer Banks and we decided to drive. So it was a 10-hour drive. And Jerry's oldest sat in my front seat. I actually loved it. It was like a great opportunity. We talked about so much stuff. And remember, we were just starting we were getting ready to move in together. So it was like just a different element of like learning about their friends and what school was like and all of the stuff. It was amazing. I loved it. My mom always said, you want to get something out of your kid, put them in the car. And listen, yeah, the kids hopped on their devices now and then for sure. I have no problem with that. I would put on a podcast. But one of Jerry's other boys was like, I want to be in your front seat. And I was like, here's the deal, dude. You can't just sit there and scroll. I was like, I'm driving too, and I'm driving 10 hours. Like, I need some intellectual stimulation as well. So, like, we can play 21 questions. Like, and can I tell you, we had some really great conversations when we did that drive. He was the one who said to me, so tell me about your divorce. He was 12 at the time. 12 years old. Like, I was so impressed by that. I was impressed by his awareness. I was impressed by his like ability to be comfortable and have those conversations. And I do firmly believe if I had given like carte blanche to just scroll endlessly, that like a lot of that would be missed. Now, I'm not trying to act like I'm not on some high horse. Like Jerry's driving the other day, sure, I'm scrolling intermittently or I'm responding to an email, but I want there to be an awareness, especially as you get older. If you and your buddy are in the car and you're doing a long road trip and it's just the two of you, I want you to be aware of what it's like having the other person completely checked out. Or if I try to ask them a question and they're completely oblivious. Also, we do a lot of carpools. What does that look like for everybody? If there are 6 boys in the car on 6 different apps, like that for me can be really overstimulating. So that is something that we're trying to work on. And I don't want every 15-minute car ride to be automatically filled with a screen. The other part, this is probably 4th time. The scrolling at full volume drives me nuts. My dad does the same thing. And it's like, hi, we're here. Again, I'm not trying to negate that I scroll, but like, what does that look like and how do we become more aware of everybody around us? Okay. Last weekend, Jerry and I took the girls to a Giants preseason game. So it's about a 2.5 car ride there, and we tailgated. We went to the game and a 2-hour ride home. As I've mentioned numerous times, I have piled on the summer. My kids are exhausted. So we did no screens the night before, and I was like, they can have their screens in the car. And that was fine on the way down there. And then we did it on the way home. And here's the problem with that. When we got home, I was tired and I wanted some downtime. Right? But I had just taken the item that I isolate kind of for my own downtime or chores or whatever, and I'd given them full access. So when they had the full access, by the time they got home, they were jumping off the walls. And Lowell even said to me, like, I got pretty bored with that. Like, I was bored with my device. And that's tricky, right? The function of my behavior in the car was to escape theirs. I was like, if they're on a device, then we can just talk or I can look up things or whatever. I did it because it made it easier for me. Ultimately, I paid a larger punishment because I had to deal with them when they got home. And I also need to recognize the pattern that I'm creating. And to be honest, it was a little bit of a light bulb moment. I've told you guys we ski in the winter and we drive home. And I don't know why I didn't apply the same logic. Usually I tell them they have to wait. It's about a 3-hour drive, an hour and a half into the drive before they can use devices. And I should have done that. Lola was like, I was bored of then they start needling each other. What I should have done was like played some music. We all could have talked. We could have listened to a podcast. This is a shameless plug. There is this podcast that I am obsessed with called Kids versus Adults Trivia. I think the little girls the guy's Australian. I think they live in the United States. Go check it out. They're like 20-minute episodes. What they do is they ask 3 adult trivia questions, 3 kid trivia questions, and they have a bonus round. Even my older kids who like roll their eyes when we put it on get so into it. We did World Cup trivia. We did F1 trivia. It is such a great filler. If you need something for the car, please check out Kids versus Adult Trivia. Other than my podcast, right? We should all listen to this one. It's amazing. So anyway, back to the function of my behavior was to escape them, to be completely honest. That sounds terrible. And ultimately, I made it worse for myself because I just set up a pattern that's not sustainable. So again, it's about noticing those patterns and starting to engage in that. I also mentioned the video games. The video games really needed their own set of rules. If you're listening to this and you're like, God, everything needs rules. Here's what I'm trying to avoid, which was what was happening, was me feeling overstimulated or annoyed, or Jerry, I'm just going to put it all on me, and being like, video games off, or like, put your phone away, and it feeling really intermittent and really random, and the kids never knowing. So by responding intermittently like I was increasing the likelihood that they were going to ask, because I responded, fine, go ahead, enough times. I was increasing the likelihood that the behavior was going to continue to occur. And to be honest, it just didn't really feel fair. So rather than responding in a knee-jerk way in the moment, depending on my mood, which feels terrible, I wanted to have some parameters in place. Now, am I going to implement this completely perfectly? No. It was pouring rain this morning. Did everyone have a little bit more screen time? Yes. But if I have something to fall back on, when we start to sway too far, or when we notice the behaviors getting more and more challenging or more negotiating, I have a framework to come back to. So for the video games, we said no video games until after 7:30 p.m. This is applied during the summer as well. Again, if it's a rainy day or something, there's an exception, but in general, that's our rule. Showers need to be done before video games, and when we get into the school year, it will be homework as well. Gaming is something that happens after everything you've done is finished. Now, part of why I think I didn't notice how egregious some of the screens were is that our kids are very active. They are on a lot of teams. They do a lot of extracurriculars. So there wasn't as much time to notice it. Now, this summer, with less teams and less extracurriculars, they had more time to engage in that, and B, I think it became more obvious. So that's the rule about gaming. Also, I really want the kids to use headphones. I don't know. I can't deal with that noise. It's a lot. I don't know why it sends me. So those are a couple things to keep in mind. This is where we get into some debate, though. One of our rooms, according to one of my children, doesn't get as good internet. And so he can't play his video games there. And so it's like, all right. So I don't mind being somewhat flexible with that. But one of the things we want to, as I just mentioned a second ago, is have some rules. Because if I'm occasionally being like, yeah, sure. And then, it's 8:00 at night and I really want to sit and watch a show and I can't because there's not a TV. And then I'm responding inconsistently or being like, no, not right now, because of this. So we're trying to put some of those systems in place. So there's a room that we call the flop room, which is like where the kids, I guess I call them lockers, and all their organization is. It's like a chiller, more downtime. I'd love it if that was the video game room, selfishly, because I never use it. I don't really love that room, and also headphones. So if that means we have to have a pair of headphones at each house or whatever that might look like, but we need to be more mindful of that. So we put these rules in place, and then we're driving. And because we can't scroll in the car, we had a very lively discussion about the rules. So now the kids were part of it. Jerry was like, how long do you think is realistic to scroll? How frequently should we ask? All of those sort of things. And so they gave their feedback. But one of the things that is happening, so I sat with my teen. He's like, these rules are ridiculous. He wasn't yelling, but he was very thoughtful in his discussion. And I have to tell you the coolest part. The 16-year-old was in the back, and they were like, yeah, but we really need this. And we talked about their relationship with technology and how that has changed and all of those sort of things. Now the kids get defensive. I get it. Like, they came here and we were talking about scrolling yesterday. I was like, well, what did you do the day before? Okay, well, what did your day look like? Did you go biking? Did you play outside with your brothers? Did you, play a game? Like, what did it look like? Because I said to him, I was like, you're not going to like this, but I can tell when you've been on a device for an extended period of time. And I was like, you can tell with the girls, right? And he's like, oh, yeah. Like, okay, I can tell with you too. And I said, none of this is to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, especially at a different parent's house or anything like that. What I'm telling you is I want you to be aware of how your behavior changes when you're on it a lot. And I want you to be aware of how much you're on it, right? And it's like, well, I was playing this with friends. And I get that. And that's amazing. Hello. I was live during COVID. I understand the social implication of that. I was like, but we also need to be aware of, like, if that becomes our only thing. I have a 10-year-old right now, so I'm going through the motions of, like, oh my God, we don't do as much pretend play, or we're not as into Barbies. And I know that, like, technology obsession is right around the corner. And I just want my kid to be a kid as long as possible. And as I've mentioned before, I need to thread that needle because we need to give access in order to learn how to have access. No different than the story we've all heard about the kid with really strict parents who goes to college and they go crazy. I don't want that to happen. I don't want my kid to like lie and sneak to get it, but I also have to figure out how to teach them to be responsible with all of that. My job isn't to create technology rules that my teenagers love. My job is to teach them how to manage it without me, right? We talk about this all the time. Our goal is for our kids not to need us. That is the ultimate goal. And so if we are managing everything for them, we're not getting to that place. As I mentioned, this is the kid who put his own screen time limits in the winter. So I noticed this because he was like, hey, want to go play soccer more and more? And I was like, yeah, this is great. Like, I'm having so much fun. I'm like, oh, what's the difference? And he was like, you guys all kept talking about how much I used my phone that I decided to put some of my screen time limits on it. And so we were talking about it the other day when we were having our calm debate about it. And I said, you're the one who put screen time limits on. He's like, yeah, but I took them off for the summer. I was like, I know, but maybe there's this middle ground. Maybe you could have given yourself an hour more a day or something to manage that. So, he recognizes it too. It's easy to lose track of time, but you're also dealing with this peer pressure or social pressure of the access and all of that. I was talking to Jerry about this, and this existed before our 13-year-old even had a phone. I remember one time we were sitting at Jerry's house watching a game, and he had an iPad that was charging, and it was going off with like FaceTime, message, FaceTime. And, that was overwhelming. And that's one of the things I even need to work with my girls on. They have the tin can phone. I'm like, you don't call someone repeatedly over and over again. You can leave a message, those sort of things. Lola borrowed my phone the other day. She was like, hey, can I text my friends and find out what teacher they got? I said, sure. And then literally 3 hours later, I had 5 group messages on my phone again. And I was like, oh. So I know this is an uphill battle. I know I do not have it all figured out. I know that, boys' relationship with technology and girls' relationship with technology might look different. More specifically, his kids, the way they like it and what they use it for and what my kids might want to use it for are going to be really different. I know I'm probably going to have more issues surrounding like messages and being left out and those sort of things. So this is going to be a work in progress, and it's going to be something we have to check in regularly. How does it feel? What does it look like? One rule that a friend of mine has is that her daughter, who's in high school, she takes her phone to charge it every night. And I think that's definitely going to be the way that I start at this point, when Lola's 17. Just kidding. I'm listening to my own advice. When she does get a phone one day, is putting those parameters on so they can learn how to have that healthy relationship. One of the things I haven't discussed is what happens if the rules are broken. If the rules are broken, and we're not like, this isn't incredibly strict. Like, hey, it was 22 minutes, but if you didn't set a timer or you're not putting it back or you're sneaking it, then the phone's going to go away for 24 hours. We're not doing it every time, but we're teaching, we're giving warnings, we'll remind, we're going to give access back to try again. But this is the consequence we decided before we were angry. This is the consequence we talked about with the boys. It's not a month. It's not taking it away randomly. It's trying to be as structured as possible rather than getting into the trap of like, I'm so mad right now. What am I going to do? So back to my point about taking the phones at night, that's not a problem with our kids right now. It hasn't been up to this point. So you don't need to put rules in place for problems that you don't have. You just, for me, as I said, with the gradual release, I think I'm going to start a little bit tighter and incrementally earn that back. And if we need to tighten up for a little bit, listen, we had to do it with bedtime. We had to do it with toothbrushing. We had to do it with getting dressed. I'm sure that will happen here as well. So again, ultimately, this is my kids learning how to manage that technology for themselves, learning how to make smart choices. I mean, we can't even get into the like talking to strangers on Snapchat or all of that sort of stuff is like even a whole nother level. We're just right now even talking about how to manage technology. We can always loosen the structure and you can tighten it as we just did, but I will say that is harder because when you've given full access, to then pull back can be a little bit more difficult. So just to wrap this up, my rules don't have to be your rules. You don't have to say to your kids, Mandy said 20 minutes. Like that's just based off like poof, it was an idea in my head. I've done zero research. I don't know. So that's not the point of this, is to take my rules. This is the structure we're starting with. And again, this is something that needs to be revisited. Ideally, if our kids could make up a song and dance to convince me that they need more technology or something, then I'll consider it. But you need to think about what's bothering you with technology. Phones at dinner time, staying up all night, endless scrolling, video games taking over family spaces, fighting every time you ask them to get off, screens replacing like real interactions. And then from there, once you identify the problem that's causing you the most frustration, is what do I want to teach? And don't forget to look at your own behavior. What is the function of your behavior? Why am I handing over a device? Why am I letting them stay on? Why am I suddenly taking it away? Am I making intentional parenting decisions? Or am I trying to avoid an argument, get some space, escape a meltdown, or get 20 minutes to myself? And sometimes the answer is I need 20 minutes to myself. One little caveat about that. So I try to use screen time intentionally. So my girls don't use their iPads. The most they use them is on long car trips. So like in the winter, they'll use them a fair bit. They don't really use them around the house very often. And I isolate TV. My kids like TV. They love an episode. I have no problem if I'm cooking dinner, throwing an episode on during the summer. Not so much, I don't really like screens during the school year. But the reason that works is because it's isolated. If they had access to it all day long, it would not hold the novelty of whatever I'm trying to complete in the moment. So those are the things you won't need to keep that you need to keep in mind. This is not about perfect parenting. I'm not so sure anything exists. Maybe you're listening to this and you're 3 years down the road with your children than me, and you're like, you think just wait, kid, you got a whole boatload of stuff. I probably do. The idea, though, isn't that I have it all figured out about technology, is the overarching, what is the function of their behavior? Often it's access. What is the function of our behavior? Often it's to escape or avoid. And what can we put in place that doesn't feel like a constant battle, that isn't necessarily that I'm taking this all away because you can't manage it. And now if you're anything like me, you're like, you have been on that too much, maybe that, bubble moment for me, brain pop moment for me. Maybe instead of like, you're on it too much, it's time to get off, think about like, how long do you think you've been on that? And then compare it to how much they've actually been on. Just again, to give them a sense of time. Okay, so technology isn't the only thing. We've created some ground rules about this summer. We also reached a breaking point over a grilled cheese sandwich. So we are finishing up our August series about back to school. And so the first 2 episodes were getting ourselves back into the routine. This episode is about technology. What are the structures we want to put in place moving forward for the school year? And next week, I'm going to touch on some picky eating. How does picky eating affect your family and your routine? So we will get into all of that next week. As always, if you could rate, review, subscribe, please do. That would mean a lot to me. And if you're interested in this contract that we sort of laid out, let me know. And I'm happy to make a copy of it and post it up there for you. Again, my rules are just this is our starting point. So you can learn with us as we go. And if you have any feedback or any things that you've run into when you've tried to do that, let me know. But all right, that's it for this week's episode of the Behavior Blueprint podcast. See you next week. If this podcast has helped you even a little bit, leaving a review is one of the biggest ways that you can help me. It helps other parents find the show, and honestly, it helps me know what's landing for you. You can do it right now while you're listening. I would really appreciate it. For information on topics like this and many more, come back to this podcast, The Behavior Blueprint Weekly, and you can always check out my content on Instagram and TikTok at The Family Behaviorist. Thanks so much.